Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Charles Milliard, who is running for leadership of the Provincial Liberal Party. And I will again explain, you asked about Bill Brownstein. So ordinarily Bill would be here. He's a bit under the weather, so we wish him well and see him soon.
I'm not taking that personally.
No, that's okay. It had nothing to do. Let me thank you for coming in. And
Thanks
second of all,
me.
you know what I'd like to do, we had Pablo Rodriguez on a couple of weeks ago. For people who don't know much about you and your background, different from Pablo, who's been in politics for a long time, federally, and now, of course, running as well for the leadership. They know his background.
Right.
You don't have a political background, so tell people how you got into this and how it all started.
Well, first, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be at Snowdon Deli. I know it's a Montreal's staple. Aaron, we met a couple of times at CJD. Yeah. I'm 45. I'm from Lévis. My parents are from Bas-Saint-Laurent in the Kamouraska region, La Pocatière, Saint-Pacôme, that area in eastern Quebec. I'm a pharmacist by trade, so I studied at Laval University, did a bachelor in pharmacy, a minor in economics, an MBA at HEC Montréal. So 22 years in Quebec City, 20 years or so in Montreal, and now I live in North Atlee, in the riding of Orford, where I intend to run for the upcoming general election.
Either way, you will be running.
Either way.
Okay.
But I'm going to win. I'm going to win this, and then I'll explain in a few minutes how. So pharmacist by trade, and then I worked at Uniprix for 15 years, mainly as executive vice president of the company. So used to manage the 400 pharmacies of the network, touring Quebec to meet all the pharmacists, all the entrepreneurs that work for Uniprix during those years. It's the second biggest chain of pharmacies in Quebec, $1.6 billion of revenues at the time. So I spent 15 years there, and then I went 2 years in public relations for National, a well-known cabinet in Canada. And the last 5 years, I was the CEO of the Federation of Chambers of Commerce of Quebec.
Which is quite the underachiever.
Yeah, it is. Well, thank you. It is the oldest national economic association in Quebec. It's been there since 1909, and it regroups all the chambers of commerce of Quebec, 125 of them. So 125 chambers, 125 ridings. There's some comparisons that needs to be made about how we give some spirit to our regions and our different parts of Quebec through business and through politics.
So that's interesting because in your particular case, first of all, you say you're from Lévis, and I know that part of the campaign up until now for you, the important part, has been traveling through Quebec. I keep seeing your posts on social media, getting out of, not Montreal. It's not about Montreal. It's about, as we say, the regions. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I've been touring Quebec for the past 25 years, to be honest. I've been in my car since 2002, first going to pharmacies and then going to the chambers of commerce. So I know my Quebec, and I think we need politicians that are going to unify Quebec. So when I hear that people want a candidate from the regions to lead the Liberal Party of Quebec, I agree with that, but at the same time, we cannot lead Quebec without Montreal, of course. So we need someone that knows both the realities of the different regions in Quebec and the different realities in the different regions of Quebec, because it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And then know Montreal as well and have a strong network in the business community in Montreal. And I think that's what I have to offer in this race.
So, when you talk about the regions, and that's one thing that we bring up about the Liberal Party, of course, provincially, is the fact that, since the Phil Couillard election, support in those regions for this party has literally fallen to historic lows. Now, I know the one thing no one saw coming, obviously, was Donald Trump, and that's obviously helping, it would seem, poll-wise anyway, the provincial Liberals, the federal Liberals as well.
Obviously.
But with respect to how you gain back that support in the regions, you're out there, you're talking to people, what are they telling you?
Well, I have a lot of people in my campaign that used to work with Robert Bourassa, with Jean Charest. So back in the days when we were strong nationalists, strong federalists at the Liberal Party of Quebec, and those people still exist. Even if the CAQ and the PQ likes to say that they don't exist anymore. They do exist, and most of them are on my team. And so the way we're going to gain back confidence throughout Quebec is by, being on the ground. I told you when the first time I met you that I started my campaign back in early January in the Upper Pontiac region, close to Fort Coulonge, Waltham, strong English-speaking communities over there, along with my M&A colleague, André Fortin, which is the only M&A from the Liberal Party of Quebec that is from the regions.
Right.
right now. So obviously we've been punished during the past 6 years, and we need to gain back that confidence. And the way we're going to do that is by first having a proposition, a platform that is going to talk to those people in the different regions of Quebec, and also by having a change of tone as to how we want to prioritize the different issues that matters to people in the different regions. And I'm going to give you an example on that. I was in Rouyn-Noranda last week, and I didn't talk about language, I didn't talk about immigration, didn't talk about secularism in Rouyn-Noranda. I talked about the mining industry, the forestry industry, how we need to review the different royalties when it comes to the mining industry, and the cities that accept to have those mining sites around them. So I'm going to run a campaign that is based on kitchen table issues, bread and butter campaign. And that, I think that's what matters, because, when I'm going into the different regions of Quebec, people don't talk to me about, you guys that much, about the English-speaking community, about secularism. They want jobs, they want transportation, they want our SMEs to work, and that's what my campaign is going to be all about.
It's interesting you say that, because as you said that, about, talk about language or whatever it happens to be.
They do sometimes, but not as much as the CAQ likes to talk about that.
And does it not come up because you're trying to shift the focus to talk about business and jobs, or does it come up because there is some concern? I mean, immigration was never on the radar up until a couple of years ago, and then suddenly it's become a big issue. When you go to the regions, is immigration even an issue?
Well, it's an issue for entrepreneurs, because they're lacking
Right.
people to work in our different companies throughout Quebec. But those topics are very popular on the newspapers because of the CAQ, because of the PQ, because the CAQ and the PQ they've been dividing us for years or for decades, depending who you're talking about. And one did that to win elections, and the other one to win a referendum, which did not happen. So the only party that is able to talk to all Quebecers from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, is the Liberal Party of Quebec. So they like to trap us on those issues, because we want to speak to everybody. So it's more complex. It most oftentimes could not be done in one sentence. So we need to be more cohesive as a party. But you know what? The people that we need to convince to come back to the Liberal Party of Quebec, or to come for the first time, are actually my family-in-law, my neighbors. I come from a 100% francophone family, learned English in Montreal and in Ottawa. And my family, they don't come to Montreal that often. They don't know Montreal. But I know Montreal, I know Lévis, I know Bas-Saint-Laurent. Yeah. So I think I can be that cohesive force that we desperately need at the Liberal Party of Quebec.
So if we take a look at whoever else is running right now, as it stands, there's yourself, there's Pablo Rodriguez, there's Marc Bélanger, Matty Roy. In terms of visibility, I think right now, if it was me speculating, it would be you and it would be Pablo Rodriguez. You've been doing this now for a while. You have, within the Quebec Chambers of Commerce,
yes,
you have a business reputation. People know who you are, which is obviously something important if you're going to lead a party. I guess the question I would have is, what's the difference between you and someone like a Pablo Rodriguez, who's coming here, and the knock against him was, well, you come from the Federal Liberals, this is not the same thing, and that's a detriment. What is the difference from what you know that he's suggesting and promising as to how he's going to run a campaign versus what you're doing?
Well, I think I agree with you that we're in a battle with two main contestants, Pablo and I think we have two very different narratives. So that's good for the party, because we're going to let the members decide. If they want someone that has been a minister, I'm announcing officially that I've never been a minister. So I'm proposing something different. I'm proposing something that I call the start of a new political cycle in Quebec. I think we're at the end of this cycle with Mr. Legault, with Mrs. Marois back a few years ago. So the Parti Québécois has succeeded in giving the keys of the party to a new generation. And I think we need to do just the same with the party. Our party is the oldest, the longest serving party in the history of Quebec, 157 years old, and yet it could die tomorrow if we don't take care of it. So I think, and I've been hearing that from people of 70, 75, 80, 85 years old. They're telling me, you know what, Charles, we had a good time with the party, but now it's time for your generation to lead us and to be the alternative to this CAQ government that we don't like. So this is a different narrative.
But does Pablo present that alternative, do you think?
Well, I'm going to let the members decide. But the other difference is that the Parti libéral du Québec has to be an umbrella party. So I want the people from the Parti libéral du Canada to be with us, but I also want the Conservatives with us. And you know what? I'd like some of the NDPs as well, because last time I checked, they were Federalists too. So we need to represent and we need to make the home comfortable for all those people. And I think that given my background, given my business background, my healthcare background, and the fact that, I've been, and we haven't discussed that, but I've been involved federally a little bit. I worked with Jean Charest back in the 90s with the Progressive Conservative Party. I worked with Jean Charest, with Joe Clark. And then I did some involvement, not officially with the Liberal Party of Canada, but my home has always been with the PLQ. I started my involvement, I was 18 years old in Lévis, and so it has been my political family for the past 25 years. So I'm not visiting. I've been there for all my adult life. And the people that I work with at the Youth Commission in 1998 are 55 years old and older like me, and they're on my team right now, and they're leading this campaign.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the hub of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen. So you mentioned in the regions what you talk about, immigration, those issues don't come up. It's, as you say, kitchen table issues. Mm-hmm. It's jobs. It's always been about jobs. But let's face it, and maybe more so in Montreal than in the rest of the regions, the issues here, and they've come up and they remain issues, things like Bill 96, Bill 21.
And I'm not trying to avoid those topics. No, I'm just saying that I'm not going to lead the discussion.
Which is good, because I'm not going to ask you about those. You can't avoid them. So let's talk about that. We've heard the Liberals. Well, Liberals voted against Bill 96.
Yep.
Bill 21, different story, ends up in the Supreme Court. But let's say you become leader of the Provincial Liberal Party tomorrow. Let's say you win that next election.
Yep.
What happens to those bills?
Well, when it comes to both Bill 96 and Bill 21, the CAQ, again, has been trapping us in those laws, pretending that if you are against those laws, you're against French and you're against secularism, which is the biggest lie on earth right now. I come from Lévis, speak French, obviously. I'm for the promotion of French, the protection of French, but I'm against a huge part of Bill 96 because it's a big hurdle for SMEs. It's a big
small and medium-sized business.
Yeah, small and medium enterprises. Yeah, business, and it's a hurdle for immigrants as well. I would love that people would learn French in 6 months. That would be amazing, but that's not going to happen. So what they're asking immigrants to learn English in 6 months, it just doesn't make sense. It's not doable for most people. So I would scrap that part. And
you'd scrap it and make it a year, 2 years, or just promise that you'll learn?
Well, when I was at FCCQ, we were proposing 2 years, hoping that maybe it would be 1 year, but certainly not 6 months.
Okay.
And when it comes to small and medium businesses, I think there's too much red tape, too much power given to the OQLF as to asking for stuff without warrants. So I think we need to, and actually businesses in Sept-Îles, in Rouyn-Noranda, have been talking to me about that. Not only companies from the West Island or from Eastern Township. Like it's too much burden, and we're going to modify that. But we can promote and protect French, and do that not at the expense of the English-speaking community rights. And I think we can do that. And that's why, as the leader, as premier, I'm going to change laws, I'm going to change regulations, but what I'm going to change to is the tone, is the way we talk to people and the way we make them feel all Quebecers together. And that's not just words. It's telling something. Like the political leadership comes from words, not only from actions.
So it's about bringing the temperature down.
Of course, way down.
Because the CAQ, it's become rather inflammatory, at least it comes across that way, and the PQ don't really make it any better.
You know that as well as I do.
Yeah. I'm wondering now, as I said a couple of minutes ago, the whole Donald Trump thing has really, and I don't think anyone could have seen this coming, has even changed provincial politics in a sense, right?
Who would have thought?
Yeah, in terms of polling. So let's say, you're the premier and we're still dealing with Donald Trump. There's 4 more years of this to go. what's your answer? What do we do? Is it about standing Quebec for Quebec? Is it about joining Team Canada, doing this together? You've thought of this? What's the plan?
Well, it's a mix of all those things, and I really appreciated the recent op-ed that Mr. Chrétien, Mr. Harper did. I think it's a way to bring us back together and work for a better Canada. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to step up, to talk to our colleagues from the other provinces and territories, and to work together. But you know what? If someone wants Canada to work better, the first requirement is to actually be interested in Canada. And I don't think we're well served with the CAQ right now. So at the National Assembly right now, we have 4 parties, 2 that are officially separatists. And I respect that. I mean, it's clear. The CAQ has been telling people that they don't want to hear about the national question, but every day they're not helping Canada work better in any way. And when I see Simon Jolin Barrette being appointed as Minister of Canadian Relations, I mean, he's going to be the Minister of Arguments with Canada. That's what it's going to be. I'm telling you. So first, I think we need to have politicians in Quebec that truly believe that a strong Quebec in a united Canada is something that works better. And Donald Trump is helping us in that way, realizing that at 40 millions, we're stronger than at 9 millions. And the way Canada was built, as you know, it was built to improve commerce east and west. And then very rapidly, we moved to an axis of north and south. But I think we need to go back to that market. That is a very sizable, interesting market at 40 millions. And as Francophones, we need to work also with the Francophone countries throughout the world. I want us to talk about the French language, not only from a defensive standpoint, but also from an offensive standpoint. The French language in Canada is declining. Let's face it, in Canada generally. But when you look at the world, it's going that way. There in 40 years, there's going to be 800 million French-speaking speakers throughout the world. So those are very interesting markets, especially in Africa, of course, but also in Europe. When you look at the way we managed the negotiation of the free trade agreement with the European Union, we were the ones that were the most adamant about signing it. And look now, the French and the Belgians are taking advantage more of that free trade than we are. So when we talk about diversification, it's not just rhetoric. It's something that we need to work so that the way we depend on the U.S. is not is going to change.
At least reduce somewhat.
Exactly.
So, as you lay out this plan, I think to myself, and I remember doing this story a couple of weeks ago, one of the biggest barriers now in talking about trade is interprovincial trade.
Yeah.
We live in a country where we trade more with other people than we do with each other, which doesn't make any sense at all.
Do you feel it's normal that we can buy Californian wines easier than Okanagan Valley wine?
And that's
that doesn't make any sense, and that's something that it's just a good image, so that people realize that when we're talking about barriers, they're true. We're putting the brakes on the way we can do business in Canada.
But at the same time, as it turns out, there are more interprovincial trade barriers in Quebec than any other province in Canada.
Yep.
So
Our government asked for the. I know. We need to work on that.
How do you work on that? What do you do? Can you change that on your own? Do you need the rest of the country to do it? I think yesterday, the Premier of New Brunswick, I might be wrong, said, you know what? We're going to go ahead on our own and sign something that says we have no more interprovincial.
Well, I think that
trade
most
barriers.
of the exceptions that we actually ask for them. So we have the power to scrap them if
that
we
on
want.
your agenda?
It is. And there's, I think we asked for 80 exceptions on the Free Trade Agreement of Canada that not a lot of people know about, that was signed in 2017. So I think we need to look at those and maybe erase half of them.
Okay.
That would make a change, especially when it comes to the recognition of competence for workers. For example, in the construction sector, how come someone that works in construction in Cornwall is not able to work in Gatineau or in Valleyfield? Does that really make any sense? The answer is no. And it's not just a question of language. It's a question just of governmental recognition that we need to work on.
One of the other issues that's now come up because of what's going on south of the border is an oil pipeline or LNG through Quebec. The Premier used to always say, and still does, there's not much of a social acceptance or appetite for that. But that's beginning to change. So where are you on that?
Well, I think Denis Coderre said it best a couple of weeks ago, saying that the social, acceptation maybe should be more regionalized. So how about if we look at how the region is perceiving project X and Y? And when you look at that, especially in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, where I was 2 weeks ago for the GNL Quebec project, do you know what is the social acceptation of the project? It's 85%. So I'm not saying that's the perfect project. And anyway, this project, as it was 5 years ago, does not exist anymore because the promoter has to come with someone else. So sometimes I'm hearing politicians saying we're going to accept those projects, but you have to ask the promoter if there's still a project to be proposed. But when you go to those regions, and it's the same thing in the Rouyn-Noranda for some mining projects, there is regional acceptation. So I think as a politician, it's a responsible stance to say that we should be open to review most of those projects so that we can have true energetic commercial corridors throughout Canada. That's the way we're going to generate new fiscal revenues. We cannot distribute money that we don't have as a government.
I would then turn to something that got talked about a lot, and I mentioned it earlier, which is immigration.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying this doesn't necessarily come up when you travel through the regions, but it's been a big issue. And for what the CAQ has done, the PQ would do even more. So where do you stand on immigration? Where are those numbers? Do we need to change them, modify? What do we need to do? What would you do?
Well, I'm not going to give you a number because when I was at FCCQ, I did not want to give a number because that number doesn't mean anything. It does not include all the different, immigrants, students, temporary workers. So this debate does not make any sense to me. I think we need to look at what is the how many people can we accept with the public services that we have in each region of Quebec. I think we need to have a more regionalistic approach to that. Because, just for example, the CAQ is asking immigrants to learn French. They go to Lévis, they go to Rimouski, and they try to register to a French lessons, and the services has been cut. I mean, it's schizophrenic, if I may say. As a pharmacist, maybe I can use that term. It doesn't make any sense. So I feel like people are very more welcoming than what we hear on the news and what the CAQ is telling us. But again, people that do not understand how our public services right now can do what they have to do to feel them more welcome.
Right.
So obviously, I want an open society. I want to welcome immigrants to Quebec. I'm one of those that think that they're a true gem for Quebec, for the future of Quebec. And again, it's all about changing the tone.
I'm going to guess that when you talk to people in the regions, they're not complaining of too many immigrants. As you said, they would like more people to come there so they could work and fill those jobs.
Of course.
Okay.
They want people. Of course, there's some housing issues as well. And this is something that we need to work better between Quebec and the municipalities of Quebec. And again, it all comes back to a change of tone again. The way the municipalities are being answered by Quebec is arrogant, is not appropriate, and most of the problems right now are in the cities. When we talk about homelessness, we talk about housing. The issues are way on the ground, and the government is not having the right relationship with the different municipalities.
Let's talk about that. Housing is a very big issue here. The city complains that the province isn't giving it enough money. The province says, well, we're giving you whatever money we can, yet things are getting worse, not better in terms of housing. I know that we were talking to Soroya Ferrata the other day saying, you know what, the city of Montreal built fewer housing units than any other city in the country. So you're the premier now. What changes with respect to housing, and what changes for Montreal with respect to how the provincial government looks at the city?
That's an important issue, and I'm going to be talking about that during this very long leadership race in the coming weeks. I'm going to make some announcements on that. But you know what? I don't think the problem is money. I think the problem is the way we manage the project and the time we lose in the process. I don't think it's
tape, bureaucracy.
Yeah, I don't think it's normal that we have so many different recipes as to how to build housing in the different regions and municipalities of Quebec. So I'm going to stop there, but this is something that we need to work on, and I don't think it's money that is a big problem right now. Yep.
Just yesterday, or day before, I guess, Jean Boulet came out, Labor Minister, and decided to introduce a new bill that basically would take the right to strike away from unions, or at least force them back to work. And obviously there's been a lot of reaction to that. What's your take on that? And,
well, we'll see what happens when the different stakeholders come into the parliamentary commissions and comment on that. But on the concept, I have to say that I agree. I think that a lot of public sectors have been taken into hostage by some strikes or some workers' issues in the past months. And Minister Boulay said, as an example, what happened at the cemetery at Notre-Dame-des-Neiges. So I'm not here to say that all that the CAQ does is bad. So I think this is something bold. This is something interesting. And if I think we need to look at that into more details. But if this is something interesting, I'll be happy to support that.
Okay. Last thing I want to touch on, and it's a big one, is healthcare.
Yep.
We know now Santé Québec with a giant budget, and the first move, of course, was to slash $1.5 billion from the system. Then we found out that the CAQ has decided, if you're a doctor and you're going to school here and you graduate, new rule, 5 years, you have to practice before you can go and decide if you want to go private. Now, there's been a lot of reaction to it. Some people think it's a good idea. Some doctors think it should be longer. Others think it will simply end up with people not wanting to come here, study here, and then be forced to work here. What do you think?
Well, I've been thinking about that for the past few weeks because I know the sector. I know what it entails when you're asking doctors to work in a specific area. But I think that's where Quebecers are right now. I think it's something that should be looked into. That is garnering a lot of support from Quebecers. The fact that the way we invest into faculties of medicine and in the training of doctors, they need to work a bit in the public sector. So I'm welcoming that carefully but optimistically. This change. But again, healthcare is the most pressing issues right now. So all we can do to work better at the entrance of the tunnel that is the healthcare system, I think it's something that we should welcome positively.
Does that mean the idea of doctors in this province? I don't think you can do this anywhere else. I remember comparing the numbers, where you can work in the public sector one day and then switch into the private sector for a month, go back to the public and private. That's something that seems to bother people. Is that a concern?
I know it bothers people, but then when people are being asked by Léger, do you use the private sector in healthcare? 42% of people said yes. So it's just hypocrite to say that it does not exist. I mean, obviously it does exist.
We know it exists, right?
And I think it could be complementary to what the public sector is offering. But the main goal should be to have the best in class when it comes to public services. But the private sector is here to help in a certain way. But it's the role of the government to manage that tricky relationships between those two arms of the sector.
And what does that entail when you manage it? Are we getting rid of private? Well, obviously, we're not getting rid of private healthcare. How do you balance that? There have been companies that have started in private healthcare and keep expanding and adding doctors. We had a situation where one recently closed in Montreal.
Yeah.
Maybe that was about management more than anything else. Are we good with private-public healthcare balance?
Well, I don't think the balance is perfect right now, but I think we should, as politicians, we need to find that balance because it does exist, and I think it's helping people more than it's hurting them. But again, there's a lot of rhetoric around that. But when close to half of the population is using the private sector, it's telling something, and I think it needs to be taken into account.
Would you get rid of Santé Québec?
Well, I didn't say that I'm going to scrap this. I said that I'll be vigilant about watching what's happening, but I'm not going to be patient about it. So the way it's moving, I'm not really positive about it. I don't think it's gonna help. But it's not in my program right now to just say that we're going to erase that right now because we've invested so much time, so much money in it. So let's see what happens. And if you know what, if it succeeds, if that's good for the government, well, I'm gonna applaud to that. But
when we said, just as a last question, we started the conversation and you said, "I'm going to win." You're obviously you have to be. You're confident now. Why do you feel you're going to win?
Because it's a battle that is going to be win on the ground. I mean, when you look at the surveys, when you look at the different journalists and commentators, it's important, but what you need is to sell cards and to have people that are card holders to actually vote. And when I'm on the ground meeting those militants, those members, I feel there's a true need of renewal for the party, and I'm very optimistic about that. And the race is long. There's still 120 days to go. So if you want to invite me back in a couple of weeks, you'll see how it's evolving in the right direction.
Charles Milliard, I wish you well. I thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
That wraps up another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. We'll see you again soon.